so-called orthodox science, there has never been allowed to be discussion of the potential of other causes or contributing factors. It's all been, as you said, Brent, what they talk about, vaccines and drugs, vaccines and drugs. Now Luc Montagnier has gone on the record saying, hey, we need to be looking at other things here as contributing factors and also ways to undo this disease. You actually make the comment maybe that there's no money in nutrition. And what did Montagnier respond?
He said, yes, there's no profit.
So he acknowledged the role of profit in the so-called science. And again, this is another big issue. We're now at the same time discussing this on World AIDS Day, or whenever you're listening to this podcast. Right now, the whole global warming hoax has become very apparent due to the emails that were revealed about the discussion of monkeying with numbers, changing numbers, deleting numbers to make it seem like there's a global issue there that really isn't there. And there's a lot of discussion among the scientific community that peer review has become a sham process, an insider kind of activity. And so now we're bringing light, thanks to House of Numbers, I believe, to more discussion, which is good for science, more questioning, which is good for science. This should not be about cult-like beliefs or religious beliefs. And the way they describe anybody who questions, dare question HIV as a cause of AIDS is thrown up as if they're heretics, as opposed to being those that are questioning the very origin, like I've covered when I've interviewed Janine Roberts in her book, Fear of the Invisible, where she goes back to Robert Gallo's original papers and shows that they were actually changed, make everybody else believe that HIV was the cause. Now Montagnier brings up, hey, maybe we can counter this with just simple antioxidants.
Antioxidants, treating oxidative stress, proper nutrition, sanitation, clean drinking water, just basic medical supplies for the diseases that are pandemic, on the African continent.
Yeah. Now, are you prepared for all of the attacks that are going to be coming your way now that this movie is going into wide release come January?
I don't necessarily view them as attacks. I understand that people are critical of the film, and I think that's a great thing that people are critical, because it just means that people are talking about it. And at the end of the day, all we want to do is spur discussion about what's going on. I do hope that people will come to this film with an open mind, and once they see the film, that they would just examine the evidence for what it is. We do focus on a family in the film, the Nagel family, and I think that their story is extremely important because Lindsay did have flip-flopping test results, and this is something that we experienced on our travels throughout the world with many different people that either tested HIV positive and then tested HIV negative on a different test or in a different lab, or vice versa. And one of the points that we highlighted in the film is how accurate are the HIV tests, and what does an HIV positive test mean? Does it mean that you should go out and get treated? Does it mean that you should get a second opinion? I think these are life-changing diagnoses, and I believe they require further examination based on the information the interviewees conveyed to me.
Now, the issue of HIV testing is very controversial because those who have actually taken the time to read the inserts on the actual tests themselves, isn't it true that they actually say not to be used as a source or a confirmatory test for the presence or absence of HIV or a diagnosis of AIDS?
I think that's a little tricky because each package insert says something different. You have screening tests. Certain screening tests do definitely say that. Then you have certain confirmatory tests. Some of them say they can diagnose HIV. Some of them say that further testing is needed. But even with these confirmatory tests, such as the Western blot, there is different criteria within the United States and throughout the globe as to how you define somebody as being HIV positive. So if somebody, say on the CDC criteria, which only requires 2 bands, comes up positive, but you then use potentially a different governing body like FDA or even the Australian criteria, which is more strict, they would no longer be positive on the test. They would be indeterminate. So when I was at the Robert Koch Institute, this was something that was revealed to me by one of the Western blot technicians. I had to ask her, how do you decide whether somebody is infected if you have 2 sets of criteria that are in conflict? And she said that you use the most sensitive criterion. It's definitely an issue up for discussion, and in the UK they don't even use the Western blot for confirmation of HIV infection, which in the United States we consider the gold standard.
Yes.
So I think there's just a lot of inconsistencies that really we need to talk about.
Yeah, indeed, and you bring it up in the film, thankfully, as well as bringing up the case of little Lindsay Nagel again. You had the Nagel family, including Cheryl Nagel, who I interviewed in studio in Minneapolis in October. A Romanian child adopted, tested HIV negative in Romania. Here in America, a doctor said no, HIV positive. She was put on AZT for a couple of years, stopped growing. The parents found out about Peter Duesberg, read the paper, learned about it, and pulled the little child off the medication. And she's alive and well, living proof at age 19, no apparent signs of any illness whatsoever. Depending on what country she was in, she would have been considered HIV negative, in, as you said, in Australia, maybe even Canada or other places. So there's a lot of differentiation between countries, and that's not typical of a disease by any other standard except when it comes into the realm of HIV and AIDS. I want to reiterate here, Brent Leung, as the filmmaker of House of Numbers, has not come out in a position-taking statement. He says, let the film speak for itself. You're going to get to see all of the experts on all sides of the equation, interviewed some dramatic stories of people that were diagnosed as such in their lives and how they were changed, some for the much for the positive and better. In fact, there's some heartwarming things that occur in this as well. As I said, Brent, this is going wide release, I believe, in January. HouseOfNumbers.com is the website. They can also see the film trailer. As we said, we're going to link to a real significant segment of the interview with Luc Montagnier, which is quite revealing as he references the antioxidant, again, reducing oxidative stress as a very viable option in helping people overcome this so-called diagnosis of HIV or AIDS. Let me ask you one question as we're wrapping up. The denialists, so-called denialists, as they use that term, and I think it's a horrific term because it harkens this concept of the Holocaust deniers. And I don't talk to any denialists that are denying that immune deficiency exists. That's not the argument, but they kind of phrase it in this way. Did you find these so-called people that are classified in this way are manipulative, conniving? I mean, you interviewed a lot of people. Was there any evidence that people, are trying to dupe people outright in this regard?
No, I think arguments exist on both sides. I think the people we would call HIV questioners, I think those people would say that the establishment is acting that way. And then, as you point out, the establishment would say that these so-called HIV questioners or dissidents are acting this way. But after speaking with people on all sides of the issue, I think the reality is that everybody just cares about people's lives. And people's lives have been shattered. People are suffering on a global level from HIV and AIDS, which is a very general comment, I know, based on the information you get in the film. But I think at the end of the day, if we could all just come together, sit at a table and talk about the different issues that each side has, I think that we would do humanity a great service.
I agree,
think we would come out
Brent.
with a lot more answers than questions, and right now there's just way too many questions, and I don't think there's enough answers for those questions.
Brent, what is standing in the way of that happening?
Well, that is a great question, and unfortunately I don't have the answer. All I can tell you is that a lot of people are either scared, angry, or worried about the information that we convey in our film, and I'm not quite sure why.
Remember, if you have not viewed the interview with Luc Montagnier that Brent conducts for House of Numbers, it's available now up on YouTube. You can link through the podcast or blog site, as well as houseofnumbers.com. You can see the whole film trailer. And, of course, if you catch it at a festival near you or in January when it's released wide, Brent. House of Numbers, filmmaker Brent Leung, and the amazing revelations from Luc Montagnier.
If you have preconceived notions going into it, I don't think that's a problem. But don't let that stop you from actually seeing the film and absorbing the content in it. Watch the Luc Montagnier piece that we put out today, and just really think about it and accept it for what it is. It's truly important information. And at the end of the day, everybody really is only concerned about saving lives. That's the primary purpose that the film was made. So I just encourage everyone to go see it and walk away with their own point of view. Whatever they come away with, that's fantastic. But just get both sides of the story. I think that's the most important thing.
House of Numbers. It's going to change the planet, the viewpoint of HIV and AIDS, and I think for the better. The discussion needs to happen, and I'm grateful that you're bringing this out so that it can and will happen despite those who may not want to move further. We're going to take this further as well, Brent. I'll have you back on. Once again, thanks so much for being a part of this very important World AIDS Day podcast on the Robert Scott Bell Show. Thank you again, Brent.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, with that, we're going to leave it, and we're going to do more when this film comes out. Brent, I hope you'll rejoin me live on the Robert Scott Bell Show, and I appreciate you taking the time on this podcast. Until the next one, remember, the power to heal is yours.
The Robert Scott Bell Show. The Robert Scott Bell Show.